Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Oracle Power PLC Q4 update and shareholder Q&A session. Throughout this recorded meeting, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I'd now like to hand you over to CEO Naheed Memon. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for putting this together, and I'm happy to sort of get right into it and take the questions, and then perhaps in the end we can sort of summarize, and I'd like to then say a few words, but we could begin straight away.
Naheed, that's great. And perhaps just diving straight in, we had a number of pre-submitted questions ahead of today's event. And the first one we have here reads as follows. It was mentioned in a response from a previous Q&A session that the company would supply an income and profit projection for the green hydrogen plant so investors could see the plant's potential financial value. When is this coming forward?
Absolutely. And I think, yes, this was in one of our previous sessions that, in fact, I had provided some idea of how this would look. The two things, we are working on the feasibility studies. And once they become available, we'll have a better sense of what the numbers are looking like with respect to cost of production, primarily, and what it would be, what it would cost per kg to produce green hydrogen. And the second thing that we are sort of waiting to have more not understanding, but much more of a view, I would say, of our commercial contracts for green hydrogen. And those who are familiar with green hydrogen and green ammonia, the large-scale commercial contracts are being sort of put together as we speak. And so that gives an idea of the revenues. So once you've got the costs, and then we've got an understanding of what the sale prices are looking like in the market for both spot as well as long-term contracts, then we'll be in a much better position to actually provide this sort of estimate. However, I mean, I can once again, with all the disclaimers and all this, sort of provisions incorporated, say something to the provide an idea again, which is like, if you look at the cost of producing green hydrogen today, I mean, our target is $2 per kg, whereas it could be currently, and the prices are expected to come down. So today it could be anything between $3 to say $4, even $5 a kg. Talking about projects which have global projects and their projections. So that, let's just take a number, $3, for example, and the sale price currently for green hydrogen, and I said the large, long, commercial, big-time contracts are being penned today, or during this period that people are now looking at engaging in such contracts. But the price could be anything between $5 to $8. And if you look at, say, $8, even $9, and don't forget that we are going to be competing with natural gas, with LNG, etc. So look at those prices as well. And maybe they form the sort of baseline benchmarking for this commodity. So if you look at, if you say, just take $5, and let's just take that for ease and for understanding and for reference, we are going to be producing 55,000 tons a year, make that into 550 million kg, and then $5 a kg. So just very roughly speaking, we're looking at revenues of, or in excess of, $250 million a year. Now, of course, this is all very subject to what kind of prices we get. I mean, it could very well sell for $9 or $10, or it could sell for $4.50 a kg. So it really depends. And then, of course, it also depends on how these prices pan out over the next 8-10 years. This is a commodity, just like oil is. It's the future oil, and so when we look at the prices of this, the market actually builds in its own speculations and its own model for the way these prices will be set going forward. Hence, it's very hard to just provide a fixed model, and then that cannot remain the way it is, because there will be times when the company will make much more money than it expects, because it is then dependent on speculation, demand, as well as the supply of other competitive fuels in the market. So I hope that kind of provides a view of the kind of model that we're talking about and the kind of picture that we're looking at.
Naheed, thank you very much for that. Perhaps just turning on to the next question, which relates to solar and wind. Solar and wind, particularly solar, are very quick to deploy versus building a hydrogen plant. Is it feasible to have a significant amount of solar installed and running in this financial year and wind in late 23 or early 24? What is stopping this from happening and growing shareholder value? Will you pursue this at speed, and what is the projected deployment as it stands?
Right. So our plan is to develop this entire project in phases. And sort of solar, the hybrid power generation first, and the LOI that we have allows us to even sell this onto the grid or to a private buyer, etc. So, I mean, the good news is that we are already in conversation with potential contractors and financiers to actually get this phase of the project moving, whilst our other work for hydrogen is also ongoing. So, that. So our main target is that. But yes, in the first phase, we are certainly targeting putting up, sort of a solar and wind production facility. Just to go back to the numbers, our target is to set up 1.2 gigawatts. That's massive. That's a huge. That's 1,200 megawatts of solar and wind together. The plan is to start off with a couple of hundred megawatts of renewable power straight away. And as I said, we are in conversation, and hopefully we would be able to update the market as soon as plans of this sort of, in this realm become more firm.
That's great, Naheed. Thank you very much for that. And perhaps two questions that we have here, which are similar in theme. The first one reads as follows: in your last update, you indicated for far possible other power generation. What are the other considerations? And if you go ahead, what would be the commissioning date?
Yes, we are in serious conversation with potential off-takers, which are regulated entities, because power is a regulated commodity. So whoever buys is a regulated entity, and there are distribution companies now, which are provincial or which are district distribution companies, and their offtake is bankable. So we are in conversation with an off-taker and a couple of other companies who would be potentially bankable off-takers, and we're in advanced discussion. And if those conversations become they progress the way we plan for them to progress, I believe we would be able to sign on to something very meaningful, and we would be able to update the market. And in case we do that, then really the timelines are similar to any other offtake agreement being inked, and then the process thereby would be that it would take us 12 months to 18 months to have the entire project put together and for the commencement to begin. So that's exactly what we're working on. And hopefully, as I said, and I'll repeat myself, we should be able to put some good news out, in the near term, and hopefully try and get the share price to reflect this achievement soon.
Perfect. That's great. And I know you just touched on timelines there, but the second question that was similar in theme reads: Pakistan is suffering from a power crisis, a gas crisis, expensive fuel, and a huge bill for importing coal. The government has expressed its intention to expand FAR coal use wherever possible. If FAR Block 6 can't achieve approval now, then when?
I agree. And it will be now. It has to be, because we, I have said earlier, people have been like, we've tested our investors' patience to no end, because, this project has taken the longest time to sort of get across the line. But we've always said, okay, sometimes the investors and our supporters have said, well, if it's not working, then sort of divest or come out of it, etc. And I've always said something like, yeah, the right price, of course I would. But now the time has really changed, and the direction has changed, and suddenly a coal asset which was almost stranded given the last few years of movement towards of sustainable renewable green energy, and we have also kind of embarked on that journey, and rightfully so, we've done that. But now our coal asset is no longer a stranded asset. There's renewed interest in its development in Pakistan, and based on the very reasons that this, our investor has pointed out, our shareholder, that there is a crisis, and I mean, it's not just in Pakistan. It's literally everywhere. A fuel crisis, an energy crisis, and Pakistan being more vulnerable given its sort of balance of payment scenario, is much more vulnerable, and hence the need to develop indigenous coal in Pakistan is much more critical today than it was yesterday or any time before. So, hence, we are very hopeful that we should be able to get this across the line. And as I said, the previous question spoke about offtake, etc. So, we are really trying to work on a model to put this across right now and get it moving, hopefully, and then give the shareholders what they have waited for a very long time.
Thank you very much, Naheed. Perhaps just turning on to the next question that we have here. The currency value drop has been significant in the last 6 months. How does this affect the overall projects in Pakistan, and how do you see this financially?
So, of course, it's not good news for anybody who lives there in many ways, because the cost of living really does go up because we are very import dependent. But leaving aside that situation, if we talk about our commercial aspect, for us, the commodities that we are in the business of producing, that's energy, um, and even hydrogen, these are all dollar indexed. So we're going to be relating to a dollar price, and hence our revenues do not get really affected. But of course, the import component of project development does go up. But then that, unfortunately, for the global market at large, gets translated and pushed onto the consumers eventually. So it's not the right thing to say, but we don't really end up paying for this. Not good news, as I said, for the whole world at large. But as far as we are concerned as a company and developers, and looking at just the pure commercial aspect, it's not a terrible story for us at all, because it just means that the selling price goes up for us.
Naheed, that's great. The next couple of questions that we have here are similar in theme, so perhaps if we could take these together. The first one reads, what confidence does the normal shareholder get in Oracle when non-executive Andreas Meij sells 8.8 million of his shares at a high price without his dealings being notified by an RNS at the time of sales? And then the second question goes on to say, what is the reason Andreas left with immediate effect?
Yeah, so I do take this opportunity to say that we do regret this incident, and it is really attributable to a person's personal negligence and a manifestation of his, I guess, a certain irresponsible behavior. Has nothing to do with the company at large and the way we function, and our sort of compliance and adherence to rules. However, we have taken note of this, and we will try our best to ensure that something like this is not repeated. With respect to the circumstances and his departure, he had certain personal and professional issues that he was dealing with, which warranted him to distance himself and immediately move on to other things. So, that is just the way. It was unfortunate for us as a company, and I think for him as well, given the circumstances that he found himself in. But on behalf of the board and the company, we do regret this incident, and we hope that it is in no way it's not attributed to any of us or to the company, as I said before.
Thank you very much for that. The next question that we have here relates to the company's current share price, and it reads, according to the RNSs issued since June 2008, Oracle have raised just under £15 million, and the share price has plummeted down 98%. So, what really have shareholders perhaps missed here, and the value for shareholders. If you could talk a bit more about that, that'd be great.
Right. So, in terms of the asset value, there's simply no doubt in what it is today as well as its prospects. But I guess for a small company, what matters is that how very quickly can we get, the sort of uh, milestones, and how do we get them across the line. And because the company has been sort of the first project that we developed, it has taken a long time for it to get across the line. There has been some sort of I guess a lack of confidence, and that then reflects in the final price. Having said that, the portfolio of our assets are extremely current and relevant and valuable. And I do believe that as a project development company, as soon as we are able to achieve the few milestones that are very, sort of now on the horizon for us, the value will certainly start reflecting the true value of the assets that the company holds and the prospects of the portfolio of the entire company. The prospects are very current, very relevant, and are not going away anywhere. So whether we look at and they're all energy assets. So they are assets which will form the sort of the kind of the mainstay, not just for our company but also at large for like global economies. So from that perspective, it's just the right place to be. But as I said, because of some delays that the company has encountered in getting certain milestones checked, the share price hasn't really reflected the value as it really should have. But of course, we are trying our best and trying to push out as hard as and fast as we can to ensure that the investors who support us get a return as soon as possible.
Thank you very much for that. The next question that we have here reads as follows: You stated Tharblock is for sale at the right price. And why don't you sell ASAP and get all the money investing into green hydrogen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably picked up on this because this question, and I merged it with something else that I spoke about earlier with respect to Thar. As I said, it's a relevant asset now, and now is not the right time to divest it. As long, I mean, if there is a development model that can be very quickly put together, then I think the shareholders deserve to sort of get the best return from that development as well, given the fact that the company did invest in it and has also remained on top of it. So now I guess it just may be the time that we can cash in and get the best benefit out of it, and that's what we're really trying to do. So and based on all the other questions that have come in earlier, the situation globally, the situation in Pakistan, the energy crisis, the value of indigenous assets, and so on. Putting all that together, this could very well be the time when something useful can be achieved on that resource.
Thank you very much, Naheed. That's great. And perhaps just moving on to the question to a question I can see here regarding gold. It reads: Is there any update on the gold, please? We need some huge news on any front this year before the share price is worthless.
Well, we are pushing very hard. It is in my sort of like the top of my agenda to close that joint venture agreement for the gold for Northern Zone. And I will try my best to convey something very positive as soon as possible with regards to that.
That's great. And just turning on to another question here relating to gold as well. If our gold and coal assets have a future, would the company consider listing them projects separately as an IPO spin-out so that they can generate their own funding and share insurance, resulting in less dilution for Oracle investors, i.e., Oracle Goldfield or Oracle Coal?
So we are very open to restructuring, depending on the timing and depending upon the circumstances. So we do have a portfolio of assets, and And as soon as we feel that any one of them is substantial enough and warrants its own positioning as a separate entity, then I don't see why we would not do that. We would, and we as I said, don't restrict ourselves to any mode of development, and it's shareholders' interest which is primary for us. So if that is to generate a sort of a benefit for our shareholders through another listing or another sort of agreement for financing, then we would certainly not shy away from that.
Thank you very much for that, Nahid. The next question here relates to your green hydrogen project. I know you've briefly touched on this before, but perhaps if there's any further color that you can add here. The question reads as follows: when does the company expect our green hydrogen project to reflect any worth in the share price?
Um, so I think that perhaps because we have the coal and the gold, and our investors are also have their sort of eyes on what's going on over there. Perhaps not enough significance is attached to one of the most valuable projects that we really have in our portfolio, and that is the green hydrogen project. I mean, there is a complete paradigm shift globally towards the development of this fuel and this commodity. And the targets that large companies and governments have set out are humongous. I mean, it is, and a lot of money is being poured into the development. So this is not going away anywhere. And so we are very, very, well placed and timely, in this sort of development kind of project. The milestones that we have set out for ourselves are clear, and I believe that as soon as some of these start to show, there will be a greater recognition of the true value here as to where we are really going. So, for example, our feasibilities with one of the biggest companies in the world is ongoing. We are in conversation with some of the biggest companies in the world for investors and contractors as contractors. As soon as some of those start to show up, that's when our shareholder base would start to realize what this is really all about. It's not a concept, it is on ground. We've got our land, we've got our permissions, we are already engaged with as I said, some of the largest companies. This project is not a project that can be done with any small companies. The largest companies in the world as well, and a lot of them are sovereign companies owned by governments. Those are the kind of companies which will come into the play. And once these things start to surface and we are able to update the market about developments in this regard, I guess the share price will and should reflect the true value of what is being developed and its relevance and its importance. The first question someone asked today was about the value of the income, and it's like a profit and loss. Well, that comes from an offtake agreement, right? So once my offtake agreements start to show up, so then you're not just talking about a project which is going to develop a product which will eventually sell at a certain price. No, then you're talking about a project which is developing a product which will be sold to XYZ, and this is no XYZ or not a small entity. This will be sold to a sovereign fund, or one of the largest companies in the world. So when these things start to show up, then the price will reflect the prospect, and the prospect will then would have by then become much more clearer. So really our objective really right now, and my objective and what I'm totally focused on, is to show the market the value of this prospect. And hopefully, as that starts to show up, I am convinced that the price will start to reflect the worth of what we are doing and what this would eventually mean in terms of returns.
Nahid, that's great. And perhaps just to end here, two questions relating to the GHP. So perhaps we could take these sequentially. The first one that we have here reads as follows: what are the next major milestones for the GHP?
So I mentioned those a bit. So we've got our feasibility study that ThyssenKrupp's doing. The results for that are expected, in a few months. Are other studies ongoing on land, etc.? Are we going to be engaging much more on the renewable side for the solar and wind? And I'll update the market as and when those developments take place. I mentioned offtake. That's huge. That's mega. That's the biggest story that we will hopefully be able to update the market with. That what are some of the arrangements that we have put in place for the sale of the commodity. And then, of course, the investors and the financiers. We are already engaged on that side. And as I said, this is no small company which will come in and say, oh, let me try and help you build this. These are big companies. And once there is, so those sort of arrangements and those sort of agreements will also start to show up. So those are the kind of milestones, the results of feasibilities, our agreements with off-takers, our agreements with financiers, our agreements with the renewable side of the project and its development, the results of other ongoing studies, etc. So there is, in our mind, the roadmap is very clear. We know where we need to get to, and we know that we don't want to be late, because now is the time to actually kind of place ourselves firmly as a supplier in the global supply chain of green hydrogen. And that's exactly what the world is building today. So, there is development in Chile, and Japan will not buy from Chile, right? Japan will buy from us because we are 10,000 kilometers from Japan. So we want to be there to be able to sell to Japan or to sell to Korea. Where will Europe buy from? Where will Australia sell to? So we really are positioning ourselves to be a key seller for green hydrogen, and as well as the fact that we have a huge, humongous domestic market. So we also have, sort of the ability to push this out in the domestic market. So we're working on those avenues as well. Again, offtake agreements domestic, offtake agreements internationally. So these will also start to show up, and we would be able to update the market in due course. And of course, these would also then help to sort of improve our valuations and the way investors are looking at our company and the confidence that they have in us.
That's great. And the final question that we had here did regard outlook and demand for offtake agreements for the GHP, but I think you might have touched on that. Is there anything further to add?
No, I think I've covered that. In fact, I may have repeated myself, but the reason I probably did that is because it's super important. So, and if I can explain this just one more sentence, it mitigates investor risk. No bank is going to give me money if I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to produce this and I'll find a buyer. I'm not going to be able to put this out on an ice cream van. Like, I need a contractual agreement with companies, with off-takers. We are producing a commodity here which will move the world and move throughout the world. So these are very important. And so mitigating risk is key. Of course, as a project developer, it is key. And also for our shareholders, it needs to be key, because if our risk is mitigated, their risk is mitigated, because they invest in us, and we need to mitigate the development risk. And that comes through robust offtake agreements also coming together.
That's great. And thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time there and addressing all of those questions that came in from investors. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so, and we'll publish those out on the platform. But perhaps before redirecting those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank everyone who joined in today. Thank you for your time. But most importantly, thank you for continuing to be there, and to continuing to sort of, have some confidence and some faith. I know that, you may have not got the entire, the return that you have been banking on, but I can assure you that everyone in the company is completely committed and working round the clock to ensure that we are able to deliver for you and for ourselves, of course, because we do want to take this company to the next level. And I really do hope that you continue to support, and we are able to get there, because we've got our targets, we've got our goals, and we've got a roadmap. Now we need your support, and we just need to be able to get through the sort of the plan that we have put together. So thank you once again, and thank you for your support going forward. Thank you.
Naheed, that's great. And thank you once again for updating investors this morning. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Oracle Power PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.